Jessica Jackson assumed she would thrive in motherhood.
I planned on loving motherhood. I planned on it being awesome. I didn't know what motherhood was, though.
It didn't take long for Jessica to discover and experience one of the hallmark states of motherhood, survival mode. And over the years, she didn't just experience it, she explored it from every angle, discovered patterns, and she cracked the code. This is the How She Moms podcast with Whitney Archibald. I'm a mother of 5 on a mission to help moms connect with your kids, manage your homes, and create your own unique version of motherhood. I curate ideas from different moms so you can pick and choose what works for you and your family. Over the years, I've learned concepts, had epiphanies, discovered game changers that have totally transformed the way I look at the world. Like when I had a second baby and truly realized how different every child is. When I realized how different every mother is and how we get to choose what matters most to us. And when I realized that managing a home was like running a small company. Jessica Jackson's framework for transitioning from surviving to thriving fits that same category, and it might just reframe your whole way of looking at motherhood and life itself because survival mode isn't exclusive to motherhood. Best of all, Jessica has given me words to describe the transition from survival mode to re-entry, to normalizing, to exploring, to thriving, and even soaring. Don't worry, she'll explain that whole process. But first, let me introduce her to you. Jessica hosts a fabulous podcast of her own, Thriving in Motherhood, where she teaches how to go from surviving to soaring. She has 4 children from age 4 to 10. She homeschools them, teaches online courses, plays the violin like a boss, and periodically invents enormous projects like hosting online conferences, which is how I met her. She does a lot of thriving. She's even made her own shoes, as you'll hear. But she also does a lot of surviving and everything in between. One thing to know up front is that Jessica will refer to 3 pillars several times before we get into them in detail. All you need to know right now are that the pillars are vision, structure, and soul. Now, on with our conversation. So, first of all, how do you define survival?
So survival is when circumstances are bigger than you. So that looks like when you're pregnant and it's hard, or when you have a new baby, or when it's super busy sports season. And so when the circumstances get bigger, those regular routines or systems that you have start to fall off, and your capacity feels like it's decreasing as the weight of the world closes in. You know, that's kind of dramatic, but we've all had those experiences, whether it's a hard thing or a good thing, of feeling we've hit that survival because circumstances are too big. There's too much going on.
Yes, I am coming out of a survival weekend where I was just in charge of the school talent show. I mean, that's
a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. And so that fits in your category of good things. Like it was great all the way around. It was a success, but we were in survival mode. It's not like a permanent thing by any means, survival mode. And it is cyclical, like it comes up over and over again.
Yeah, that's why this 5-step path that we're going to talk about is so important today, because it's a skill set. And when you learn to understand where you are along that path, then you cannot panic. You know everything's temporary. It's going to be okay. And it gives you something to focus on with your attention and energy, because otherwise you're going to have these experiences of panicking when things get out of control, you know, and you start to feel like, and your mind goes like, it's always been like this. It's always going to be like this. I'm a horrible mom because we've eaten out for 5 nights in a row while I'm doing the school talent show. You know, we're blowing our budget, but it's just temporary, and it's just right now, and you're going to be able to move out of it.
Yes. Okay. And I think that's half of the mindset right there, is just recognizing that it's temporary, right?
Oh, 100%. In fact, when I was really struggling with my first, I probably had 2 kids, maybe I had 3. I read this book about optimism. And one of the markers of an optimistic person versus a pessimistic person is how we view time. And people that felt like things were temporary were just naturally more optimistic. Those that felt like things were going to last forever were pessimistic. So for me, classic example was I would call my mom with my newborn, you know, first time mom, and I would say, I am never going to sleep again. I won't be, it'll have to be like, she'll a teenager when I sleep again. But wait, then she'll be staying up late. So I'm literally never going to sleep again. You know, like that was all in my early 20-year-old brain. Like that was all I could focus on. And so classic pessimistic mindset in that moment, right? And in survival mode for me, that was panic. That was a panic experience because of how I was viewing time.
Okay, that's so interesting. So, can you give us a couple more examples of when you were in survival mode and what that felt like?
Yeah, so survival mode. Oh, there's a lot of
Yeah.
there's been a lot of
Yeah.
time. And I will also say there's another part of this. When we're talking about survival mode here, this is talking about our circumstances. There's another way that you can feel surviving, and this will come up later, but there's something that I call the 3 pillars of thriving. And when you have these in place, you can still be in survival mode circumstances, but you kind of have what I call a thriving mindset. So, and which I've kind of described, like one of these keys is the temporary thing. So you can be in survival mode because of your circumstances, or you can be in survival mode because some of these pillars are off and you don't have those skills yet. And so you have to build some skills. It's not just time. But when it comes to the circumstances, what we're talking about, that's what this 5-step path is for. And so survival mode circumstances that are hard. I had surgery when I had 3 little kids and we were moving in 2 weeks. It was one of those situations where we had moved across the country. I'd had a miscarriage that led to me needing to have hernia repair surgery. And then by the time I got into the doctors, he's like, I can do it tomorrow, or it was Wednesday. It was Monday. He said, I can do it Wednesday morning. And we were moving, like literally pulling out with the moving truck 2.5 weeks later to go from Connecticut down to Georgia. Those were circumstances that were way bigger than myself, right? And so in that moment, though, what was really exciting, that was one of the first times I had kind of gotten my pillars in place, these 3 pillars. And it was a really exciting experiment for me because I realized that I could navigate that well. And I could, instead of panicking, my husband and I would communicate using this 5-step path and say like, okay, we're in a survival season right now. And so how are we going to handle that? Okay, we've got to simplify. We've got to ask for help. We've got to determine what is absolutely essential and let everything else go. And we had to do things that were uncomfortable for us. Like I booked babysitters for my kid every day of the week because my husband was trying to finish a job and get ready for a new job while I'm recovering from surgery. I literally cannot take care of my kids. My kids had never been really babysat. I had to ask a whole lot of people because it was a whole lot of days.
People that you didn't know very well, right? Because you just
correct, because
moved
we'd been there. Yeah, we'd been there for 9 months, but we knew them really well after that week. So it was kind of, but we were able to kind of use a lot of these skills that come from the pillars, and it was okay. And I also was able to treat it like, okay, this is a vacation. I'm on vacation now. I can do nothing. I can rest in this bed. I'm going to use it to my advantage. I'm going to listen to audiobooks. I made a list of things I could do while I was lying in bed. I also slept a ton and watched movies because I was recovering from surgery. But I just tried to reframe it in my mind and enjoy the restful season because I have yet to have another experience where my kids are babysat every day for 5 days, 6 days in a row. So I enjoyed it, right? So that's a situation where it's a survival situation and it's not panic, right? And so that's what this path can do, is it can help give you clarity about what to focus on in that mode so you can do it well even when things are hard.
Great. Okay, so I want to launch into the path itself. But before we do, I feel like we need to know what the destination looks like. So what does thriving look like?
Okay. So when I developed this path, I used to think, when I was this young mom and I was surviving, I did not have the skills necessary beyond, like I didn't have mindset. I didn't have skills. I didn't know what I was doing. And it takes a while. This first time you do the path, it takes a while. I was like, I want to thrive. And for me, that meant like not feel horrible all the time and kind of enjoy what I'm doing. That was my goal of thriving.
Yeah.
Now, when I developed this path, like, cause I kind of went up and down it and then was able to look back and be like, oh, there's a pattern here. What I realized, though, is once you move along the path, this now opens up a spot for you where you're not like in panic mode in your circumstances. They've kind of calmed down enough that now you get to choose how you grow. And chances are when it comes to these 3 pillars, you've got some holes. Like I always have holes, right? My kids are always changing. Things are always switching in our home. Seasons are different. And so I use this thriving season to intentionally build up areas that I need to improve on in my own life, in my family, personally, on these all pillars. And what's really exciting is as you do that, we now have a new end goal, which is soaring.
Nice.
And so for me, this soaring mother is someone who uses her gifts and talents to serve those in her circle of influence. So in her family, in her church, in her community, at the PTA, whatever that looks like for you. Second, O is for obedience, that you have a relationship with God. Whatever that looks like for you, we all have different spiritual practices, and feel like you have the capacity to get guidance and act on it from him or whatever spirituality looks like for you. A is for adventure, that you can enjoy life as an adventure, that you have time and bandwidth to adventure with your kids. And R is for relationships, where you are able to cultivate and enjoy meaningful relationships with, friends and family. And so that's the goal now for me, is to go really from this surviving to soaring as we build up these skills. And the beautiful thing is, it took me years because I had no clue what I was doing.
Right.
But when you have this path and you kind of know where you are and where you're headed, you can get there a lot faster.
That's what I love about learning from other moms, because
Yes.
what if somebody had handed you this framework when you were in that early survival mode?
I would have been so grateful. I would have been so grateful. Well, and I love what you do, because it's like, I have a framework, but there's a gazillion ways to do it. And so I think How She Moms is so great, because you then zoom into the gazillion ways that there is to do motherhood, right? And so I think it's really fun to see how your research and all of the you've interviewed so many moms and collect so many different ideas just to inspire people, and take it as a starting point. I love that.
Well, thank you. Okay, so can you tell me how you figured out the path?
Okay, so for me, I found myself in survival mode often, with my circumstances. So my husband was in grad school. He got his master's. He got his PhD. He traveled a lot. I mean, I was 39 and a half weeks pregnant with my third child when my husband flew. We were in Indiana. He flew to Washington, D.C. for a conference that he really needed to be at this thing. And I just had all of my friends kind of huddled around me like, okay, because I was having contractions this entire time, but he had to go. So, so traveling, I've had surgeries. We've had incredibly challenging pregnancies and cross-country moves, and none of it we've lived by family. But I'm determined. I've always been determined to thrive, to feel good, to enjoy motherhood, even though I wasn't. And so I've worked endlessly and tirelessly to close that gap for myself. So I've done loads of research and, cognitive behavioral therapy, and in productivity and organization and goal setting and decluttering. And I mean, just high performance habits, just reading, learning so much. And so I was able to get better, and I would claw my way out, I'd feel like things are going well, and then I'd get pregnant, or we would move, or, something would happen. And so I'd just slide back down. It was so discouraging because I was just so desperate to thrive. And as I did that multiple times, I hit this point. I was pregnant with my fourth child, and I realized there's a pattern here. There is a process here, and I keep doing it over and over and over again. And so once I was able to understand that there is a pattern, there is a process, and just lay it out, not only has it been good for me, it has been so good for my marriage. It's given us a language to talk about where we are, with my husband. And so we can both be on the same page about what's happening. It's given me a language to talk to my friends, and all these moms around me. So we can say, like, you know what, I'm on step 3 right now, and I know exactly what that means. Or I'm on step 2, I need dinner. I know exactly what that means. And so as we use this as to understand our circumstances, it allows us to communicate more clearly and to calm ourselves down and to pull in a community in a way that's more effective than just saying, I'm really struggling. This is a really hard week. That's a very vague problem. But when we can get specific about what the problem is, then we know what to do to solve it.
Right. Okay. So let's dig into the pattern that you recognized. What are the 5 steps?
Yeah, so the first step is survival mode. We've talked about the circumstances are bigger than you. I like to think of this as a seed getting buried in the ground and covered with dirt, because that is what survival mode feels like, being completely buried. Okay, step 2 is reentry. Now, reentry is when people think they're still in survival mode because it is so overwhelming, but actually you are moving along the path. So this is good news. But this is when, let's say, your talent show experience ended and now you maybe are behind on laundry, or you are, needing to catch up on the grocery shopping you didn't do, or the kids, you didn't go buy the stuff for the kids that they needed over the weekend, whatever it is, right?
Right.
So now your list is longer and it feels overwhelming. And the good news is, as you get better at this, like you as a seasoned mom with older kids, you probably have more systems in place and it doesn't feel like you don't feel that impact quite as much. But as a young mom, when it's just you and your kids are little and it can be so overwhelming to get out of a hard season or start to climb out of a hard season and just feel completely buried. And so this is where the seed is starting to sprout, but it is not there yet to the surface. And you are doing that hard work of getting through the surface. It's called reentry because after my second son was born, I got something called C. diff at the hospital when I delivered him. And so I was very, very sick. We didn't know what I was sick with. But after 2 weeks, I went to the emergency room and they said, okay, you're staying. And I spent a week fighting for my life. And it took many months to recover from that. But there was a point, at first everyone kind of came in and helped because I needed help. I had a barely 2-year-old, a 2-week-old, and I was in the hospital. But at some point the help left and I had to stand on my own 2 feet and figure out, recovery and taking care of these kids. And I felt like a rocket ship coming through the atmosphere, trying to get back to planet Earth. And I wasn't sure if we were going to blow up or not.
Yeah.
So that is where reentry comes from. Right? It can feel really intense.
I like that.
That was an act, but that's what it felt like, right? Yeah. Yeah. So, but we can also go with the less dramatic, seed sprouting through the dirt.
But
so
drama's always good. I'm in favor of drama.
It was so hard though. That is legitimately how I felt.
It's dramatic. And I think if we don't acknowledge that, then we're less relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is that it's easy to think about laundry and dishes. But the other really important part of reentry is it's also about personal habits. It's about getting dressed again in the morning. It's about brushing your teeth. One of my pregnancies, I could not brush my teeth the entire time. I had to relearn the habit of brushing my teeth. How embarrassing is that? But that was part of reentry, right? Or like writing a journal again, reading your scriptures if that's part of your life. It's those little habits that support you too. It's all reentry because those are all things that you maybe let go of in that hard season.
This might be one of my favorite stages that you acknowledge, because I think so many times when we're in survival mode, we're looking at this kind of artificial finish line, like, to use my really small example, when the talent show is over, life's going to be so much easier. But you forget about all those things that you've pushed aside. You forget that that's not going to be the case. And so if you set your expectations for a reentry phase, and you know that it's going to take time, that it's not your artificial finish line isn't the true finish line, it makes it less of a punch in the face when you finish the talent show. And like yesterday, I spent hours in the kitchen, like recovering.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. Yeah, that is a reentry moment. That is exactly reentry. And it's also not a failure, right? It's just part of the process. It's just as how it works. So the third phase is normalizing. And so this is particularly relevant for those young moms that have never done this before, but also for all of us. It just takes longer the very first time you've gone up the path. It took me a few years the first time I went up this path. So this is where you just get enough things running smoothly, laundry running smoothly, dishes running smoothly, like those essentials that you need so that not every moment of the day is an emergency. Like people are getting fed and you do know where your clothes are. And the reason why you have to have these is because so often I think as moms, we're like normalizing. I have to get everything working. I need to get my entire house to 100%. But the problem with that is a very boring way to go about life. It is, and it's a long, and the other problem with thinking normalizing has to be everything is I feel like then before I can do anything for me, step 4 is exploring. Before I can do anything for me, I have to get the house ready, which means if a kid opens a bag of toys or gets some food out or, lives in the house, I feel like they're working against me. And so it becomes like this fight. Yeah. If you make this house, like you have to have everything perfect before you can do anything for you, then you're headbutting against everybody else living in the home, which doesn't help them or you.
That is so true. Okay, so since you've given such great examples all along the way, can you tell us about a time when you were in this normalizing stage and what you did about it?
Sure. It can be so simple. And the nice thing is that once you've gone through this a few times, you have things to go back to. So you might be building it for the first time. You might have things to go back to. So here's a good example. My husband traveled for a few weeks and then my sister-in-law came into town and it was so fun. But we all, like you, neglected the kitchen. We neglected the rooms. The house was not what we did those 2 weeks. So when he left, I have something called my get ahead plan, which is where we spend the day, we clean the house. This is a shortcut for reentry tip. I make the focus in the morning cleaning the house. I get the kitchen totally clean, and then we go to Chipotle for dinner because I can order like 2 meals and a bunch of tortillas, and it's a very economical way to feed my family. And then I don't have to clean up the kitchen. I don't have to do it. Okay. So now I've gone through reentry. It's set. But tomorrow, so I don't get buried again, what am I doing with my kids? Okay. The emphasis is, all right, you're eating a meal. Let's get your dishes to the sink. Please put the dishes into the dishwasher. You need to unload the dishwasher. Okay. Whose job is is it to take out the recycling? Whose job is it to sweep the floor? Whose job is it to wipe the table? Okay, that's what normalizing looks like. It's just knowing that, okay, this is going to require, because for me, it's not just me, it's my whole family. We got to get the whole family system. And so now you've had energy going into getting the house reset. That took me a day. But now your energy needs to go into getting all of those machine wheels turning again of how the family functions together.
And in some cases, it looks like building those systems. And in some
Yep.
cases, it's just reminding them, because I've definitely had that experience where all of a sudden it's like they've never had to help in the kitchen before, and you're asking them to do this monumental task when it's just trying to get back to the normal way it functioned before that free-for-all that you were in during survival.
Yeah. Well, and my best tip for that is just, guys, we're setting the timer for 5 minutes. Let's get it done. And just keep it short, like for everybody. Set the 3-minute timer. Let's see if we can beat it. And then it just cuts the whining down, at least in my house, like 80%.
Great. Okay. So that step 3 is normalizing. What's step 4?
Step 4 is my favorite. It's super essential the first time you've gone up the path, but it's so important as seasons continue to change in our life as well, which is exploring. Now, I like to think about this as a bee buzzing around and collecting pollen from all the flowers. Because what happens is, as moms, unless we know what we like, what brings us joy, what our talents are, what we're interested in, what we're curious about, we very quickly can become stuck in normalizing. I think that's very common. You get the house functioning and then you don't know what else to do with your time. And so you either spend it scrolling social media, or you let housework take up a ton of time because there's nothing to fill in the gaps. It's something to get excited about, or you spend forever. I can make dishes take 45 minutes if I try and find a YouTube video I'm interested in and find my Bluetooth headphones and put it on, and it just takes forever. And then I got to stop because I want to hear what they were saying. Or I can bust out dishes in 10 minutes and then go work on the project I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to take time to explore. And for a lot of moms, when I became a mom, I was in my early 20s. And I had just I had gone, through school, and then was teaching, and then motherhood. And so it's well, what's your favorite food? I don't know. What's your favorite color? I don't know. What do you like to do? I don't know. I didn't know. And so this exploring phase, at first, it really is probably just going to be paying attention. What do I like to do? What do I like to eat? What do I want to spend my time doing now? And then as your kids get older, it starts becoming fun because it's a whole family exploring project. I feel the dynamics change. And so it's fun. It's fun the first time. It's exciting as your kids get older and it changes, but it's essential.
You just gave me words for an experience that happened probably 2 weeks ago, before the whole talent show sped up my life. My youngest is 7 now. And we usually, when they get home, that's when the craziness begins in my day. And it's just go, go, go. I'm driving people here and there. Sometimes I have to be 2 places at once. It was a Thursday. Nobody had any activities. They were all playing with friends in the neighborhood or just entertaining themselves. And my house was clean. And I suddenly had time in the afternoon. It was it felt insane. I was this has never happened before. I don't even know what to do with myself. And I was oh, wait, that book I've been wanting to read. And so I grabbed a book and sat on the couch in the middle of the afternoon. And I felt like a queen. I felt like I was this indulgent, pampered woman. I was I'm reading in the afternoon in the sunlight. It felt so good. And I just kind of realized, I haven't had disposable time for a really long time. So I felt that stage and it was amazing.
Yes. Congratulations. The sunlight part is what did it for me. That does create queen status right there.
So much. Yeah. It was just this magical moment. And I'm and I had that thought. I was even if just Thursdays become this, we can start doing all those things that I wanted to do someday. We could start going rock climbing outside every Thursday. We could start doing hikes again. All these things that we hadn't done in a while because we've been running around with like chickens with their heads cut off. Like that's the saying. I guess.
Well, so this is what's really exciting. So you're jumping ahead to this. Well, actually, no, we're here. We're at step 5, thriving,
Yes,
right?
okay.
So the point of this exploring phase is to get to where you get to these 3 pillars. So the first one is vision, and that's what's really exciting because after you explore, some of the things aren't going to stick. You're like, I don't really care. Other things are going to stick, and that's going to be part of your family vision. The second pillar is structure, and that's where you're going to build essential, like, routines and systems and rhythms into place so that the things that are important happen. And the third is soul, and that's taking care of your mental, emotional, spiritual, physical health. So what you just described here was actually a seasoned mom doing all 3. You took advantage of a Thursday afternoon to nurture your soul. You have these ideas and you're seeing, okay, this is my family rhythm. This is the structure.
Yeah.
How can we slip something from my vision into the Thursday slot? Rock climbing. That's part of my family vision, right? So you actually, as an experienced mom, without realizing it, used all 3 pillars on Thursday afternoon. But that's the plan, right?
Yes.
Like you dug yourself out. Like this is how it works.
Yeah.
And this is the repeatable pattern.
And it really felt like, not to be, well, we're being dramatic today, right? It really felt like,
why not?
Like the heavens were opening. It was like, you have arrived.
Well, you're soaring.
Yeah.
This is soaring. This is what I say. We're using soaring, right?
It did.
Yeah,
it
that's
felt
what
like
soaring
I was
is.
soaring.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like that that's not, at that moment it was like alone time doing what I wanted. I get alone time during the day, but that's when I do my work,
Yeah.
But I like that it can also, it's not like that goal of soaring is just being alone and having your kids away. I like that you incorporate like a family vision, because that was one of the first places my mind went to. Like, oh, this is what feels good right now, but all these other things that we could do together and really enjoy each other without all the drudgery. I mean, the drudgery is always going to be there, but yeah.
Well, and I like to reframe that drudgery,
Okay,
right? Like
yes.
use the drudgery to work for me. Like normalizing these systems, they're not just blah. And those are opportunities to teach kids skills. That's an opportunity to talk. That's an opportunity to build relationships. There's so much good things, and have kids feel like they're a part of something, and to understand how systems work. You're gonna be working with other people your entire life, learning how to communicate better, learning how to problem solve. So I feel like we kind of give this housework a bad rap, but I feel like it's one of our best parenting tools that we have, and to do all of these other important things that we want to do.
Yes.
Because my goal is to build a strong family while moving forward on my goals. Like I want to do both.
Yes.
You want to do both.
Exactly.
You do both.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I feel like we shortchanged the exploring step a little bit. You have some good questions to ask to help us figure out what we want, what our vision is for, so that once we get to that soaring level.
Yeah. So there's a lot of questions that you can ask. I have a whole workbook for just the vision part. But
Excellent.
Before you get to the vision part, like that can be overwhelming. And if it's your first time, if you are that young mom, or if you're very overwhelmed with your space and you're like, I am still drowning in my house, this exploring thing, first of all, is just being curious. Like, what are you curious about? Is there something that you've had on your mind for a long time that you haven't done? What is that? Or just paying attention to what do you like and what do you not like? Even when I was a young mom, it's like, do I like playing on the floor with my kids? I don't know. Do I like reading? No, I like reading with them. That's what I like to do, And so just because a lot of the time it's not just about your personal time exploring. It's also exploring, like, what kind of mom are you? What kind of person do you want to be? Like I homeschool. I'm with my kids all day long, every day. And so I wanted to build a life I didn't feel like I had to escape from. So I needed to learn, what did I enjoy doing with my kids? What was important to me?
Yeah.
And so that is a lot of exploring too. So it's, and then this is great too. I feel like your episodes are a lot of exploring, exploring how to do all the different systems, right? What are the 250 ways I can do my laundry system here? Okay, it's exaggeration, but right? Like you explore all of it actually, as you try and piece together what kind of life you want and what kind of person are you?
Yeah. Yeah. Exploring and experimentation are kind of the same game. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the reason why we call it exploring is because I feel like in this day and age, it's like, if I start doing something, it has to make me money. If I start doing something, I have to go all in. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like you need to give yourself permission to try something before you commit to it, and let that be enough, and give yourself permission to walk away from it. So I just feel like there's too much pressure with social media. So there's not. it's exploring.
That's great. Well, and by modeling that to our kids, we give them that skill. And I think children have almost more pressure to commit to something and go all in, especially these days, like with sports, that they have to, specialize so early. And, I think giving ourselves and our children permission to just explore and not have to be all in to something that they're just trying for the first time, I think that's a beautiful mindset.
Oh, and it is so contagious. I assure you. It's also messy. So just warning you, full disclosure. I mean, so like when my husband was traveling, I was like, you know what? I need shoes. I'm going to figure out how to make myself shoes. I have 2 different size feet. So I did. I figured it out. And just watched some YouTube videos and I made myself a pair of shoes. Well, guess what? My 9-year-old daughter was paying attention and I come down from my power nap in the afternoon. She had followed all the same steps and made herself shoes. And so, like, kids watch. And I could have looked at that as, oh, I should be doing something with them. It's taking away from our time together. But really, I just inspired them. And they ran with it for days.
Literally, right? In their new shoes.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
Yeah. That was good. Did not do that intentionally. So, but that's the point, right? Like whatever it is. I mean, that's a silly example.
I think it's
but like whatever
great
it is
example.
That you do. Okay, it's a great example. It's a great example, right? And then I'm like, oh, I like this. I think I can make this better. So I've checked out a book from the library, and all of my kids are poring over this book about what kind of shoes they want to make, and it doesn't matter what it is. There's no value of like better exploring or less than but like whatever I've done, whether it's wood carving or playing the ukulele or learning a new song on the piano or violin or learning more about animals or birds or flowers, like the kids pick up on that. So we are so focused, I feel like, on providing activities for our kids, giving our kids experiences, especially when they're young. And I'm like, no. When your kids are under 7, especially, like, just do what you love to do. They are going to come along from the ride and they're going to have fun with it. And it's going to refuel both of you. And as they get older, yes, obviously there is nurturing the talents and all of those things too. Like it's both, but we're so, in our society, it's like, how many lessons can I sign my kids up for? I'm thinking, no. Save that time for yourself. Explore, and your kids will have fun with you.
Yes. Oh, this is so beautiful. So it's so cool to have a pattern for this because sometimes survival mode is predictable. Sometimes it just lands on you. But sometimes survival mode is predictable. Again, back to the talent show, I knew it was going to be a busy season. I know we have some vacations ahead. We have, but just projects can put you into survival mode, I guess. Sometimes it's a scheduled surgery and you're going to be in survival mode. I know we can't do much about the circumstances that just kind of happen unexpectedly, but what can you do if you know there's a survival period or stage coming to prepare for that?
Yeah, this is a great question because it's something I'm very intentional about. So we talk about these 3 pillars of, having your vision and building structures and systems and taking care of your soul. And if you are intentionally working on those 3 pillars, the beautiful outcome of that is that your home and your life and yourself is going to be running along fairly smoothly. And so just right there, it'll take longer for things to fall apart when you hit a survival mode. Like survival circumstances, planned or not planned.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, if you see it coming and you know it's going to happen, then you start thinking ahead like, okay, what do I want reentry to be like? What do I want normalizing to be like? Okay, if that's the case, we are using paper plates like hardcore for the next 2 weeks so that there are not a pile of dishes in the sink. Or we're going to, like you just start thinking ahead. If you print, I've got that checklist, there's like things in survival mode of what to do during that time. You start doing those things like to prepare for it, simplify, figure out what your essentials are and communicate. If this is a new conversation for you and your, spouse, because it is a joint conversation, it impacts both of your lives. It impacts everyone in the family. One of my favorite ways to say is like, hey, I can tell that there's going to be a lot of balls in the air and I cannot juggle them all. Which balls should we choose to set down? Because I'm going to start dropping them. And then it is just a very gentle way of starting that conversation with your husband, or if your kids are older, with your family, to start saying, what could we let go of? And then it's not just all on you to hold things together or watch them fall apart, but it is a family decision to decide what are our priorities right now, what really matters to us, which room has to stay clean for our sanity, all of those things, so that you can navigate it as a whole family.
Right. Yeah. And I think sometimes if we don't communicate, we could maybe we're planning for this survival mode and we know it's coming, but if we haven't told everybody else that it's coming, then we're causing that unexpected survival mode to happen to them, when that's unnecessary.
Well, and I often find like my kids are so happy to help. They are so happy to step in or fill in gaps. And like sometimes the whole, like if it's a long time, we start out optimistic. And by the end of that week, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, we just keep lowering the standard. Like it does disintegrate. There is not an ideal way to do it. I cannot say that I'm like, once you cannot like,
that's
I don't
why
think
it's
you can build enough
survival.
walls around yourself. Yes, it does happen. So you start out idealistic and then you just slowly watch things disintegrate. But it takes longer to disintegrate and everyone's kind of on the same page. But I will say like, especially on those shorter spurts, a few days or a weekend or a week, it's a lot easier to just ask family members or friends to help fill in the gaps if you need to, if it's important.
Yeah.
Even things, just a silly example, my kids are older, but it's like, I'm exhausted. I've got kids that aren't sleeping well at night. So when my husband's traveling, I am, just really struggling to get sleep. And my 9-year-old is just like, Mom, go take a nap. I got it. I'm like, really? Okay, great. Yeah. Awesome.
That's amazing.
Thanks. And I could just keep muscling through victim martyr, right? That's easy to do in survival mode, right? It's all in me. There's no other options. And really it's just like, there are options. There's always options.
Yeah. And I like the idea of when you can preparing for it, because sometimes you just, even though the options are the same, when you're in survival mode, you're blinded. You can't see them, either blinded by sleep deprivation or just overwhelm or whatever the case may be. That's great.
Yep. But in that moment then, because I was like, after I was sleeping for like 6-hour nights for days, I was like, this is it. Like, do you know what I do now? We're just going to go outside. We are just going to be outside. I'm not going to try and get it. We're just going to keep people fed and outside, and then we'll be happy-ish, and we will go through reentry and normalizing on the other end, right? And instead of being like, all is lost and it's horrible and I could have prepared better for this, it's just like, we're just going to get through it as gracefully as possible.
Yes. That's so great. Okay. I would love to just go through those 4 tools of how to get through survival mode. And yes.
Okay, so you do different things when you're in different seasons.
Yes.
You have different focuses. And for survival mode, there's 4 things that I really like to do to help me kind of put my energy, because your mind is going to try and solve a problem. And so I want to give it a problem to solve, because when I am in survival mode, that is when I am most likely to be negative. In fact, most people are. It's just what our brains do. And it's miserable. And so these are things that you can do to try to have a thriving mindset, even in survival circumstances. This is something where my 4th pregnancy, I barely made it through mentally, emotionally through my 3rd pregnancy. It was physically like so hard. I couldn't walk and I was very sick. So I trained. I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So these tips came from what I learned between my 3rd pregnancy and my 4th pregnancy. And I tested it out on my 4th pregnancy. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm good. My body is not functioning. I am way sicker. I have way more pain. I am not even walking sort of well at all. I got a wheelchair, but you know what? I'm fine. Like, I got this.
Wow.
And it's attributed to these 4 things. So these are battle tested 4 things.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay. Yeah. So the first one is to simplify. And we've actually talked a lot about this one. I don't know if there's more to be said, but you look at what's essential and then simplify it further and and you're going to start out ideal thinking you can do more than you can. You're not going to be able to do it. It's going to keep dropping and points fall apart, but that's okay. Like, you just try and simplify as much as you can.
But I like that idea of like having a list of things and then just crossing some of those out. I'm a very visual person, so I think if you can talk about which balls you want to drop, but for me, like getting a list of things that are in my head, just on paper instead of still in my head, but then being able to be like, okay, that's for later, that's for later, that's for later. This is what matters. I just like the visual of that. That's a great part of your process.
Thank you. Yeah. And I use it all the time, right? Because a lot of the time, the reason why this is so powerful is because we have these sneaky should statements in our head. And really, you are subconsciously, you're telling yourself, I should be doing this. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. That is a recipe for depression. And so we just need to call it out. We need to list out all those things we feel like we should be doing and tell ourselves, I actually am deciding not to do this.
Beautiful.
And then you're free. Okay, so another one is to find something to be excited about and look forward to. This I got from Brendon Burchard's High Performance Habits. Pretty sure that's where it came from. And the idea here is that when things are really hard, it's very easy to become hopeless. And so it's really important every day to have something that you can look forward to. This is particularly true, like in your talent show situation. The talent show's exciting. Yeah. I'm sure it was like fun, right? It was different. Great. Like it's a built-in experience, right? That's fun. But this is for those things like those hard pregnancies when you're in bed for months, or when you are sick, or when your kids are sick, or when your husband's traveling, right? These are when you need something to look forward to and it doesn't have to be big and grand. For me, like when I was really sick, we were reading Winnie the Pooh. And I looked forward to reading that with my kids. It's a funny story. They love it, but like there's so much adult humor, right? Yes. So it doesn't have to be grand. Or, the last week of my pregnancy with number 3, the one that I barely made it through, like I had weeks of contractions and we were sent home again from the hospital. And my husband's like, okay, on Monday, we're going to go make some s'mores. On Tuesday, we're going to go do this fun thing. And he just like booked out the week of fun things. And then my water broke on the way home and we went over train tracks and we didn't do any of them, but it's fine. So, but the idea is like, sometimes you need to plan something big, a little bit more meaty. And sometimes just something simple like a book is good enough. Or having that project for the evenings when your husband's traveling out of town, so that it's not just scrolling social media and despair about having to do it all again tomorrow by yourself. Yeah. Right. Just being intentional about that.
Even a chocolate bar, man.
Oh, yeah. There's a secret stash in the house, always for these circumstances. Absolutely. That's a given. Yeah. We didn't need to call that now. It's a given. So another thing that's really important in survival mode is and this is something I heard on a podcast, like when podcasts were first starting. I think my almost 10-year-old was like 6 months old, and I was traveling by myself with her and desperate. And I heard this concept that really stuck with me, which is when you can't focus on who you want to be. And I was in a situation where there was not a lot I could do. I couldn't move forward on these goals. I was hardly sleeping, let alone functioning during the day. But I could choose who I wanted to be and focus on that. And so it doesn't have to be fancy. When I was pregnant, all I could do was smile. I was like, I can smile. Or like surgery, I can smile. And when my kids are in the room with me, I can just listen to them. Like that's who I could be after surgery. Yeah. I couldn't do anything at all for them, but I could smile and I could listen. And so sometimes it's very simple. And sometimes it's, a more active as you're going through this busy time with your family, right? Maybe it's, I'm going to not yell at my kids as we are trying to get to the places because we're late, but it's just intentionally saying like, who do I want to be in this moment when things are more stressful or there's more going on or it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. And was there one more? Is that? Oh, journaling.
All right. So the last thing that I like to do in the survival mode is to journal. And even if I can't journal, it's what I'm trying to think about as I'm going to sleep at night. So I started out having to journal because it didn't come naturally to me. It wasn't memorized, but now it's a habit. It's something I can just pull out. So when I'm going to sleep or when I'm taking a shower, if I don't feel like I've got the capacity to sit and write, I still think these things. And so the questions that I ask in a hard season always that make the biggest difference are, what were my big wins today? Because in these hard seasons, it's so easy to focus on what didn't go well, to feel that mom guilt, to feel discouragement, to feel like you are not doing what you want to do, or all I do is, dot. And so instead we want to disrupt that thinking and focus on your big wins. And it could be something you did. It can be how you showed up. It can be, they're little. They do not have to be like incredible. The second question I like to ask are what my magic moments today. And those are often what I think of when it comes to relationships with my kids or my husband. Just those sweet little things that are so easy to miss in a busy day or a hard day. Yeah. And the beautiful thing is that as we write these things down, we actually are telling our brains this is significant. And over time, you're actually creating new pathways in your brain and rewiring your brain to be more optimistic and to look for these things. And so over time, those hard things that you're always focusing on slowly slide out of the picture as you focus on these other things instead. There's 2 other questions I really like to ask is, how have I seen the hand of the Lord or God in my life today? Because then I realize that it's really miraculous and I'm not doing this by myself, and it gives me so much hope. And the final one is, what am I grateful for today? Because we all have heard over and over again the brain science about gratitude.
Yeah. Oh, so many great things. Because sometimes that survival mode is going to be long. And so planning for reentry is great, and like knowing that it's temporary is great. But if it's just seems to be dragging on, I like that there are some tools that you can do to make survival mode a little less survivorish.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the other thing too, so like in that fourth pregnancy, that was physically so hard.
Yeah.
And I would even say that one was harder on my husband because he physically was doing so much more while working full time, for our family. So I was like, my job is to lay in bed and be nice. And he was like running the household. So that was really hard for him. But one of the things we discovered about survival mode, and every marriage and partnership is different, but I discovered that for us, what we do when things get hard is we put our heads down, and it's like we're not yoked and we're both pulling the same wagon, but we're pulling it this way by ourselves, like opposite directions by ourselves, and we feel like we're doing it by ourselves, and we both get so mad because we're both trying so hard and
not getting very far.
Not getting very far, and we're exhausted and burned out, and we don't see what each other is doing, we just see what we're doing, and it's so maddening. And so bonus, at the end of the day, in these hard seasons, we go out of our way to talk for 10 minutes. How are you doing? What is hard for you right now? Is there something I can do to help you that would be meaningful right now? And every day we're just taking 5-10 minutes to have this conversation. And it doesn't necessarily make things easier, but it helps us feel like we're doing it together and can acknowledge what each other did, and also see if there's a way that we can fill in the gaps for each other.
Oh man, you just described residency for my husband's residency. While I'm raising tiny children and he's doing like ridiculous amounts of work, we were totally pulling our carts in separate directions. And not only did we didn't physically ever see each other doing those things. Like, he came home when the kids were in bed. He didn't see me doing all the work with the kids. I couldn't go to the hospital and see what he was doing. So we didn't even know what that path looked like for each other. But yeah, it was hard to keep resentment from building up. And yeah, man, these flashbacks of all these survival situations. But it's kind of cool to look back at all the ways you survived. Like, that's another cool part of the whole path, is to look back and like, wow, we did really hard things. Like, we're pretty awesome.
Well, and that's actually so helpful, because now when I face a hard situation, I have, this is why I think being a young, like having young kids, whether it's you're in your 20s or your 30s, like, it's so hard because you don't have any proof that you can do it.
Yeah.
Versus, you get, I've been at it for 10 years now, and you've been at it longer, right? How
17,
it's like 17, right? 17 years, right? And like, you can look back and be like, oh, I've done this before. I have not slept for weeks or months at a time before. I can do this, or I can navigate high emotions. I've been doing that for 17 years, right? Like, but at first you don't have that. And so all you have is the hope moving forward that this is going to work. And so I think it's really important to both acknowledge, like, it's okay that you don't have that yet, but you can make it. Yeah. And it's really exciting to look back and look at how much you've grown. Because like, my capacity now is 10 times bigger than it was when I first was starting out, even though the load was so much smaller.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I've thought about that whole time machine scenario. Like, if you could take what you know now and go back, and even if it was just to give that young mom a hug, or to just take some of the burden.
I would have rocked it.
I know. We would be so awesome. Yeah. But that's okay. It's part of the process.
That's why we just pass it on and help others.
Right. And that's why we should accept help from those in advanced stages, whether that's grandparents or friends that are in a different stage. Those are the people we need help from.
Yeah, or books. I mean, that's what I did. Was desperate. I didn't feel like I had a lot of help, and I was reading books like crazy. I mean, there's like, I didn't have family close by. I never have, right? So
I didn't in those early stages, for sure.
Yeah, so I just feel like there's so many ways to get that mentorship.
Yeah.
I know, that was a lot to take in. You probably need a cheat sheet. And you're in luck. You can download a free guide to the path on Jessica's website, thrivinginmotherhoodpodcast.com. If you want even more, you can buy her online self-paced course, Made to Soar, Your Next 90 Days. And you can find Jessica's podcast, Thriving in Motherhood, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and now even a video podcast on YouTube. Whatever step of the path you're on, and especially if you're in survival mode, I hope this mindset transforms your life as it has mine and gives you some strategies to either enjoy the phase you're in or help you get to the next phase. Happy traveling!
Thank you so much for listening to the How She Moms podcast and for being part of this community. There are so many other ways for you to connect and hopefully also contribute. I share tips and ideas regularly on Instagram and Facebook at How She Moms. You can find past episodes and other resources at howshemoms.com. And you can always just email me directly at whitney@howshemoms.com. Special thanks to my own wonderful mom, Susan Singley, for recording my theme music. She played this song all the time when I was growing up, and to me, it's the soundtrack of motherhood.